All right, it is 7:04 p.m. on March 30th, 2023. We'll call to order this special meeting of the Reading Board of Education being held strictly remotely via Zoom. Present for the board are myself, Chris Parkin. I see Mike Hoffman, John Shanahan, Laura Gibbons, Shirag Sadana, and Stephanie Olton. Present for the administration are Dr. McKinnon and Ms. Grafani. And I also note that we have the chair of our facilities committee, Mr. D'Agostino, with us also. First item of business is public comment. Any members of the public wishing to be heard, please indicate so by raising your hand or otherwise making yourself known. Seeing none, we'll move on to board member comment. Any board member comment tonight? Seeing none, we'll move right along to item 4, capital plan review and fiscal year 24 funding requests. So to sort of frame the issue briefly, when we left off in our February and March discussions regarding capital, there were questions about whether or not to move forward with the request for the elevator, and we kicked that back to the facilities committee for further discussion. We're also waiting for additional information from the architecture firm Tecton with respect to the cost of the EdSpecs design upgrades for both buildings. The facilities committee has met twice in the past 10 days and worked with the Tecton firm to come up with some updated information to allow us to move forward and make requests to the Board of Finance for consideration on Monday of next week. So what I want to do first is go over a proposed revised capital plan. So earlier this week, the facilities committee met and approved the new capital plan that is on the screen right now. The two material revisions since the last time the board approved a capital plan are the elevator replacement. The estimated cost has been increased from $150,000 to $250,000. And after deliberation, the facilities committee, it is their recommendation to postpone the replacement of the elevator until no sooner than a request in the 24-25 fiscal year, which would be 2 years from now. That was based on a change or updated information with respect to the availability of parts to repair the elevator, and the concern that if the elevator went out of commission, it would be permanently out of commission is no longer, I think, an accurate representation. And so it was the committee's consensus that we should push that out by 2 years and not make that request for funding in the current year. The other addition you'll see is the Educational Spaces Modernization Project Phase 1 has been flushed out. That is the grades K and 1 and 2 areas at RES, as well as the John Reed Library and Community Room that were the subject of our bid back in, I want to say, December, out for proposals from the architecture firms. We have now worked with Tecton, and they have put together a proposal that has a proposed budget of approximately $475,000 at this point, which you can walk through in a moment. And it was the committee's recommendation to request an amount of funding not to exceed $485,000 to make sure that the project met all of its goals at or under that budget number. And so, well, ultimately, what I'll want to do is have a vote to approve this revised capital plan. Before we do that, I think it makes sense to walk through the modernization project phase 1 plan, so everyone has on the same page as to what it is baked into that $485,000 that's proposed. So this is phase 1 of possibly a multi-phase project, and the first it spaces at RES and at John Reed. First at RES in the kindergarten wing. I think the headline here with respect to the kindergarten wing is replacing the temporary walls that exist in the main kindergarten corridor, as well as the partitions between the classrooms, with permanent walls, and creating fire-safe doors for each of the 5 classrooms, each of the 6 classrooms down there, and also converting what is now more or less storage space, those light blue shaded areas, converting those into small group instruction spaces that would have entry doors from each of the classrooms, so that 2 large classrooms could share those small group instruction spaces as would be necessary. In addition, where we see in yellow, we would put storage solutions up and down the corridor to replace what is now can best be described as a mishmash of ways to keep things, and to put some more images onto that, this is the picture of the kindergarten wing that would make Mr. Hoffman shudder, and is a reflection of the current hodgepodge of storage solutions. You'll also note that we currently keep kindergarten students' belongings in cubbies that are in that main hallway. Part of this project would provide storage space on the inside of the individual classrooms and provide a hallway that is strictly for storage for teachers' needs. Going into the rooms, the small group instruction rooms, this is the outside looking in. You can see 2 glass windows that have been totally covered over, and those sort of temporary partition walls there. All of that will become full fire safe walls with drywall, and doors will be installed to access that from inside the classroom. Right now, they're only accessible from the main corridor. In addition, there are currently out of use water troughs and art easel spaces in the kindergarten classrooms. We would tear those out entirely, and that will provide additional space for storage in the classroom. Upon consultation with the staff, nobody has a need for them or use for them, and we can reclaim that space inside of the classrooms. Moving up to the second grade wing, we would be reclaiming space in the main second grade corridor and creating multiple open areas for small group instruction and collaborative space, as well as renovating the areas that currently have sinks and probably original 1970 something cabinetry. Here's a look at what we're talking about. All of these temporary partitions would go away, and instead we would have central seating and central workspace. The sinks are in the bottom left. All of that would come out and be replaced with additional storage, and we would again make it possible to more efficiently store the supplies in both areas. Here's some of the furniture that would be proposed for the second grade to create those workspaces. And over in John Reed, the scope is much narrower. We're talking primarily about the library and the reading room. Here's a look at the library and the reading room as they are today. One of the main issues in the reading room is acoustics, and we'd be addressing that with acoustic tiling up in the ceiling, as well as some new furniture choices to help deaden the sound in there. We'd also be updating the furniture in the main library area, as well as if you look at room 195 in the floor plan, that is a small conference room basically that is primarily storage at this point, but the goal is going to be to install glass in the top right-hand side wall here, so that space is visible to the circulation desk at the front and can be used for a variety of collaborative purposes. This is obviously not a rendering of that space, but it would be something similar to that coming in the community room. I'm sorry, excuse me, in the library. In the community room, we'd be looking strictly at a furniture upgrade to create a variety of flexible options with the purchase of tables and chairs that could be aligned for a variety of collaborative functions, as you can kind of see in the grayed out down below. What does it all cost? The budget that was provided to us by the architects show for John Reed Middle School a total cost of $175,167.60 to accomplish those goals, which at John Reed, as you can see, is primarily furniture based. And over at RES, the total cost of $303,952, which includes both the furniture cost of all that storage and all the additional seating, as well as the work with respect to the walls and the demolition in the kindergarten and some limited millwork in the second grade one. So that is a brief overview of what we're calling the Reading Educational Spaces Modernization Project Phase 1. So tonight, what we'll be looking to do is confirm whether or not we'd like to request this funding from our Board of Finance for the current fiscal year, which would go on the ballot on May 2nd, and whether we would approve the capital plan as proposed and as presented. So having gone through all of that, are there any questions or comments about anything? And Mike or Laura, would you like to add anything from the Facilities Committee's perspective?
I would just say that, so we walked these spaces on, I guess it was Tuesday, and seeing the spaces as they are now and the design plans for the future, I think these improvements are going to be so beneficial to both schools. So I'm excited about this project.
if you were to walk RES and just, get an overall impression for the entire building, I think you would go right back to these two spaces at RES that we're going to modify. I think you'd go back there and say, hey, I think we need to work on this area. The pictures are worth 1,000 words. I think the teachers are doing their best with what they have, and it is hodgepodge. Some of this cabinetry and some of the cabinets that they're working with for storage, may have been around since the 70s. This will definitely bring us into into a new age here, and we're doing it in a thoughtful way. Tecton, I think, is going to be working with the fire marshal to make sure everything is, everything that we bring in is fire safe and is put in a way that maybe even improves on what we have from an access standpoint.
Yeah, I think from when we did the bid for the architecture firms, I had the benefit of walking both buildings with the various firms that came to bid. And I agree with you, Mike. The two areas that we're focusing on at RES are the ones that everybody kind of goes, oh, that's tired and that needs work. Whereas when we walked the 3rd and 4th grade corridors that have big windows, they're the oldest part of the building, but big windows, lots of natural light, lots of space. The needs don't jump out the same way that the needs jump out in the 1972 4 whatever wing does.
And I want to point out.
Oh, sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
Just one more thing. Back to the elevator. The fact that our placeholder price for the elevator for years has been in the 150 range, and that it moved to 250. This doesn't have anything to do with why we moved it off. It was simply the change from if it breaks, this is what we thought. If it breaks, then we can't get the parts to fix it. And so the responsible thing would, and I was all in, let's replace it if that's the case. But we found out that that wasn't the case. And, we've since actually done some minor repairs and gotten parts. So since it's not an emergency and it is working fine, we decided to push it.
Shrug.
Just a question. This would also address the kindergarten wing security concerns that were raised a few months ago, correct?
Yes, it would create locking doors for each of the classrooms in addition to the key card access into that entire wing.
Okay.
And it would improve fire safety in as much as each of the rooms would have their own fire rating, and in a way that right now there's sort of one room.
Cool.
Okay. And the other, and actually one thing that for Mike and Laura's benefit in particular, when we spoke yesterday at the Facilities Committee, the Tecton estimate, I believe, was about $425,000. And we had agreed as a committee that we felt comfortable adding to that to make sure that all of the soft costs that might come around this and any unexpected changes were built into that. Dr. McKinnon has since had further discussions with Tecton, and that's where they revised their number up to 475 based on our conversation with the architects at the Facilities Committee yesterday. So they came up close to where we had come. So there's somewhat of a question of whether 485 is the number we wanted to ask for a little bit more, or we're still comfortable at 485 in light of their adjustment. They changed, I believe, Dr. McKinnon, the projected cost per square foot on the walls and increased that.
Yes, and they also added interior doors to those small group instruction rooms as well. So the delta is 479 to 485, so it's about $6,000.
Yeah.
Does this include things like paint and light fixtures and all those sorts of things? Because if not, we should probably add a bit more.
Or put another way, is the soft cost, that 20% contingency, still in there?
Yes.
Yeah. So
Is
they
it to
added
cover
for the
that sort of-
doors and they added for the linear feet, and then that got compounded 20% too.
Okay. Does that account for things like paint? I mean, that's costs a lot.
I don't think it is in the proposal directly. I don't see an allocation for paint.
Or is that something that would typically be included in the soft cost? Or is that just accounting for more of variability and, in all the actual line
I
items?
understood that's what the soft cost was for.
Okay.
I think it was spoken more about more along the lines of for things that we run into that we weren't aware of. But one thing that's important is that is there's a 20% contingency on the entire project, furniture included, which is where we're probably not likely to need it,
Right.
which means that, you know, it's a much larger percentage of the actual construction. Is that the construction total for RES down there, Chris? 103.1?
Yeah.
So, you know, we've got a 50 if you just said there's no contingency on furniture and all of that contingency is related to construction, that's a 50% contingency, which is
Right, because the furniture costs are pretty darn firm if they're March 1 numbers that are good for the year.
unless we order more.
Right. The only thing that's going to change is the volume, not the unit cost, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
I want to give Mr. D'Agostino an opportunity to comment because he's been involved in this process at the beginning and chairs our facilities committee. Mike, do you have any thoughts or comments in light of the change on Tecton's part in the number?
No, I think it's helpful that their number actually came up to the number that, you know, we had kind of landed on it as a facilities committee. And I do think that I do agree that the contingency and everything, I think the opinion of the committee was that there would be you know, plenty of contingency left to do things like, you know, painting and other collateral items that might come up. So I think that's a safe number to make sure that we accomplish everything the way Dr. McKinnon envisioned. So I think it's great, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike. And to be clear, Tecton didn't know that we had come to 485 before they came back at 479. So we did a pretty good job coming to the same place.
Another comment, you know, so we have Tecton, the architects, working on this. But for those that haven't been to a facility committee, we're blessed to have Mike D'Agostino, who's a contractor himself, and Dan Conlon, who's an architect. And both of those guys bring a level of experience to that committee and a line of questioning in a situation like this that's very helpful. You know, even in you know, discussions about code, or maybe especially, you know, discussions about making sure that we meet code for all these changes. So there's a lot of thought that goes into this, and that facilities committee, I think, is set up very nicely to vet and, you know, a project like this.
Yeah. Yes, I agree, Mike. Thank you to Mike D'Agostino, Dan, and the hard work of the staff that's on that committee also from both buildings. So. All right. So any other questions or comments on the proposal? Then why don't we do this? Let's look for a motion to adopt the revised capital plan.
I'll make the motion, Chris.
Mike, is there a second?
Second,
Laura, any discussion on the capital plan itself? Right. Seeing none, we'll call the question on adopting what is on the screen as the revised capital plan for the Reading Board of Education. And because this is a strictly Zoom meeting, we'll do it by roll. Mike.
Yes.
Shirag.
Yes.
Steph.
Yes.
John Shanahan.
Yes.
Laura.
yes.
I vote yes, and the motion carries 6-0. And swinging back then to the funding request, we've already requested the $65,000 for the alarm panel formally, and I've conveyed that to the Board of Finance. We are deferring the elevator replacement, and so now we would just look for a motion to formally request $485,000 for educational spaces modernization project phase 1.
Chris, I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mike. Is there a second?
Second,
Thank you, Laura. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll take the vote by roll yet again. Mike,
Yes.
Shirag,
Yes.
Steph,
Yes.
John Shanahan,
Yes.
Laura.
yes.
I vote yes, and the motion carries 6-0. Thank you all, and thank you again to the Facilities Committee for your hard work, and to Dr. McKinnon for your hard work working with Tecton to get this to where it is. Moving forward, we'll present this to the Board of Finance on Monday. Assuming that it gets their blessing, it'll be on the referendum May 1st. And if it is adopted, we will be in a position to break ground on July 1st, which will be exciting. There being no further business on the agenda, we'll look for a motion to adjourn. Mike, and second from Laura, and absent objection, we are adjourned at 7:24.